What is up, Lorcana fam? Robbie C here, and today we're going to go over 20 cards that I believe you should look at if you are trying to grow your Lorcana collection and you're just looking for some competitive cards that you can use to really spice up or buff up your deck while staying on a budget. How do we land at 20? Well, honestly, I wanted to go with about 3 or 4 cards per color, and just being 100% honest, 20 sounded a lot better than 18. Now, when I say budget, I mean cards costing around $1 at the most. That was the goal for each of them. Obviously, some colors we had to sort of stretch it a little bit in order to sort of grab the essence of that ink color. These are cards that I think can really lay into and add on to essentially every single starter deck that exists out there. So if you're watching this and you just got into the game, welcome. We're excited to have you here. And if you were looking to spice up or grow a starter deck that you've gone out and purchased or received as a gift, these are all fantastic options. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into our first ink color, and that is Amber. Julieta Madrigal, Excellent Cook. When you play this character, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. If you remove damage this way, you draw a card. The other beautiful part about this is that it is a 3 cost. It is inkable, which means that in situations where you need to sort of play this card, awesome. It works. It's able to pull a damage off of a character that may be banishing itself soon. It also allows you an opportunity to, let's say, draw a card, guaranteed. But also because it's inkable, one thing we're really going to embrace during this list is if it's inkable, that makes it even more diverse, because in situations where you maybe don't need it, you can ink it to progress your deck even further and get further into your game plan. The second card we're looking at is Donald Duck, Musketeer Soldier. This is a card that has Bodyguard, which means when you play it, it can enter Exerted or turn sideways to protect your characters. This is a wonderful card. If it was just a Bodyguard coming into 2/3 at 3 cost, that would be a little high, but it is inkable. But the best part is that when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore this turn. Oftentimes, you can sort of be wary if your opponent has a board staring you down, thinking, oh, I don't want to turn this little quester because let's say that this character quests for 2, well, it only has 1 or 2 willpower, and because of that, it's just going to die the next turn. Thankfully, because of Donald Duck, you can bring Donald Duck in, exert it as a bodyguard, and give 1 lore to one of your heavy questers that you were a little nervous. Now you can let them quest for free and know that if they're going to swing in and try to take out your questing character, they're going to have to go through Donald Duck first. Next up is a little wombo package, and we're talking about the Queen Shift package. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, shifting is where you take 1 card and you play it, and then you play another card on top of it in a later turn, or it honestly can be the same turn if you want to, at a discounted price. And the Queen Shift package is one that's been around since the 2nd set, and it is a really powerful package that can catch people off guard. And it starts with the first, which is the 1-drop, the Queen Regal Monarch. Now, this is just a 1-drop vanilla 2/2. Vanilla meaning she doesn't have any abilities. She's just a 2/2 character, but she always threatens the shift when she comes out, which with shifting is where we look at the 5-drop, the Queen Commanding Presence. Now, she's a shift 2, which means on her 2nd turn, you can play and shift this queen on. Not only that, but because you shifted her, she's immediately dry, so you can use her ability. And her ability is whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength this turn, and your chosen character gets +4 strength. So you can very effectively lower the strength of opposing characters and boost the strength of yours to either take out locations or even swing in and have some very free trades, because you can drop most character strengths down to 0. We're going to do an honorable mention in every single color, and the honorable mentions are powerful cards that I really do think you could use to boost your deck, but aren't necessarily going to break the bank entirely, but they're usually going to be above that $1 mark. But the price here they get, you're certainly usually not adding 4 ofs, so you don't have to buy a complete play set. And for Amber, we're looking at Perdita, Devoted Mother. This is a legendary from set 3, and when you play this character, whenever she quests, you may play a character with a cost of 2 or less from your discard for free. If you're playing Amber, Amber has a lot of these 1- and 2-drop characters that you're trying to put down, such as some Lilos and some more aggressive cards. Perdita slots in great, and even though she's uninkable, coming in at 6 cost, she's a 1/6, so she has a lot of health that's going to be tough to take out in challenges, and she survives some of the controlled damage songs. But also, it's not only when she enters the board, she immediately makes an impact by bringing something from the discard, but every time she quests. So if your opponent opponent doesn't necessarily want to tackle Perdita and they're tackling some of your smaller characters, you just know that by the time she comes around, there's going to be characters in your discard. She's going to bring them back, and they have to deal with her. They can't deal with other characters on your board, which makes it really great. Moving on to Amethyst, or purple. The first card we got to talk about, this is a card that if you have a Yu-Gi-Oh background, you know the meme, Pot of Greed, play card, draw 2 cards. This is Pot of Greed inside of Lorcana. It's a song that you can be sung by a 3-cost character or more for free, and also it allows you to draw 2 cards. This is just super powerful. Even if you have to hard cast this and you don't sing it at 3 to draw 2 cards, it is just a very efficient way to refill your hand. I feel like there are so few Amethyst decks that are not running some copies of Friends on the other side, if not multiple copies. And usually when you see something from the first chapter, which at the time of recording this, we're about to start chapter 7, those first chapter cards that are impactful can be pricey, but this one's only coming in 27 cents, which is fantastic for not breaking the bank. For $1, you're going to end up with a full play set of this. And like I said, if you're interested in playing purple or Amethyst, you're going to be using these cards. It's going to be something that you're almost always trying to work into the list. So very, very excited to see that this fits our budget-friendly option. Next up, you feel the theme of Amethyst is draw. This ink color draws better than pretty much anything else inside of Lorcana, and the 1-drops are definitely part of that help. So often in Lorcana, having the ability to ink something and play something, to have board presence right off the bat in turn 1 can be absolutely huge. And in purple, because of the Madam Mim character line, you certainly want to make sure that you have characters out on the board. Now, Magic Broom is simple. It's a 1-cost, inkable 1/2. And whenever you play another character, you may banish this character to draw a card. What this means is that on your turn, you can play this on turn 1. On turn 2, if you feel like, hey, I need to draw a card, and you're looking at your opponent and you know that if you quest that broom, they're just going to challenge it and get rid of it, you can quite simply turn it, quest for 1, get the lore from it, and then ink your card, play a 2-drop, and then banish the broom. This allows your opponent to not be able to banish something on your side of the board, as well as draw you a card to replace itself. Card advantage is something we definitely want to be focusing on, and whenever we are going card for card, if we play a card, we have put that card advantage onto the board, but if they banish it, well, now the character, if their character still lives, they technically have a card advantage in that they have 1 more character on the board than we do. You don't really lose card advantage with this card, which is fantastic. It's just shifting around where that card is because of the fact that it replaces itself. Now in set 2, purple got one of its biggest identity pieces, which is the bounce package. The bounce package is the idea that you're going to be playing cards that have an effect when they enter the board, and that they have an effect when they leave the board. This is wrapped around the Merlin line inside of purple. The Madam Mim line comes right alongside of it and has a ability. When you play this character, you may banish her or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. What's really cool about Madam Mim is she's a 2-drop. So when you pair her alongside the next card that we're going to mention, Merlin Goat has a simple effect. When you play this character and when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. So later on in the game, if you have 6 lore on your turn, you can play Merlin Goat and gain a lore. Then you can play Madam Mim Snake. If there's no other characters on the board, the Madam Mim characters cannot be played because they essentially banish themselves. But when you play her, you can return chosen character of yours to your hand. So you're going to bounce that Merlin Goat back to your hand, and it's going to gain you another lore because it's now exited play. And it's sitting in your hand, so that way on the next turn, you could play it again. That allows you to get 3 lore almost instantaneously out of 1 single character, which can be huge for gaining you momentum. This is one of the biggest reasons that purple becomes a very scary color, because of the bounce package. If you're looking at your opponent, even if they have no characters on board, if they have a few cards in hand, which is likely going to happen because of Friends on the Other Side and Magic Broom and the other draw mechanics inside of purple, they're going to be able to really lean in and take advantage of that, and their reach or their ability to close out the game and gain lore quickly goes up dramatically. There are other versions of Madam Mim Snake that get a little pricier. Madam Mim Fox is certainly one that you want to look at, but she's one of the pricier cards that is a staple in purple. But the honorable mention that we want to want to look at is actually from the Merlin line, and that is Merlin Rabbit. Now, Rabbit kind of swings. Sometimes he's a $2 card. Merlin Rabbit is one of the best draw engines in the game when paired alongside the Madam Mims. So instead of lore that you gain from the goat, Merlin Rabbit, when he enters the board, draws you a card. And when he exits the board, he draws you a card. And remember, it's when he leaves play. So it's not just when he's bounced back to your hand. If your opponent chooses to banish this character or does something to remove the character in general, like put it into your inkwell, he's still left play, which means he's going to be drawing you a card. So the best part about Merlin Rabbit is that by simply playing him, he doesn't only just replace himself, he actually draws you an additional card based on the fact that he's going to be exiting play in some form or fashion. And if he doesn't, usually he's used to sing friends on the other side. You want to keep him sideways from either singing songs or questing as long as possible, telling your opponent, hey, if you don't get rid of this, well, congratulations. Eventually, I'm either going to bounce it back to my hand and draw more cards, or it's just going to keep causing you problems. Moving on to Emerald. Emerald is personally one of my favorite colors, but Emerald has some really cool mechanics inside of it, and Emerald serves as sort of a disruptor. That's its identity. And the first card is no different. This is Ursula Deceiver. She's a 2-drop, 1/3 body. So with 3 willpower, she's going to be a little more difficult to remove. She's also inkable, which is fantastic. And her ability is when you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a song of your choice. So this does 3 things for us. On turn 2, it allows us to have board presence, which is always helpful. But not only that, when we play it, we gather information and that we get to see our opponent's entire hand. So if we have strong cards that we want to play on turn 3, or we want to sort of build our game plan accordingly, well, we know that we can sort of plan out and see this is what they have already. Obviously, they're going to be drawing at least a card every single turn, but we can sort of adjust our game plan and expectations accordingly. If you see that they have removal in their hand because of this, you maybe don't play your weak character that does something cool on turn 3. You hold off until they either ink that card or you see them use it on something else. But not only that, she allows us to discard a song of our choice. So if we play Ursula Deceiver on turn 2, maybe the Amethyst opponent we have hasn't had the chance to play Friends on the Other Side or sing Friends on the Other Side yet. Well, it's a song, so we just get to rip it out of their hand and put it straight into the discard. So we get triple value from this. But the sneaky fourth side is if your opponent knows that you're playing green, they almost always have to assume that you have Ursula Deceiver in your deck. And so because of that, they're going to have to make some tough decisions when they're inking on turn 1 or 2. Do they want to keep a song in their hand? Because if they do keep it and you have Ursula Deceiver, congratulations, you're yoinking it right out of their hand. This is a really, really powerful card. Very phenomenal. One of the best 2-drops in the game just because of all the implications that it has for your opponent and for what else you can do. Next up, keeping the song idea going. This is our first card that sort of breaks the $1 rule, but if I'm being honest, this card goes through spikes where it's really good for a little while and then it goes away. Heading into set 7, it definitely is poising itself to have some impact, and that is the Muses, Proclaimer of Heroes. This is a 4-drop inkable card, which is fantastic, but it has 2 incredibly cool effects. The first is Ward. Opponents can't choose this character except to challenge, which means that if it doesn't turn sideways, it's very difficult to remove this card because they can't challenge it when it's not turned sideways. They can't even target it with effects that make cards turn sideways. Cannot be touched outside of challenges. That is such a cool effect, and it really allows it to become a strong presence in keeping our board strong and weakening their board based on its second ability, the Gospel Truth. Whenever you play a song, you may return chosen character with 2 or strength or less to that player's hand. We can use this a multitude of ways. We can play a song and we can bounce back some of their weaker characters to their hand, which means that they're going to have to either replay them, which means that they're going to have to dry, and therefore they can't challenge us the next turn, or it allows us to have control and we can actually use this to bounce our own characters back to hand. There's an Amber Aerial that searches the deck for songs that we can just bounce continually back to our hand in order to go look for more songs. There are cards such as Dock and Steel that when we play it, it allows us to discard our hand and draw 2 cards. So if we want to bounce the Dock over and over again, we can keep drawing 2 cards. We can ink, we can play, we can bounce Dock back, we can play him, we can draw 2 more cards. There's just an ever moving cycle. And if you put more than one muse on the board, often that can be GG for your opponent, because every single time you're going to play a song, you're going to be bouncing at least 1 character, if not 2, because these muses triggers do stack on top of one another. So you can, if you have multiple muses, be bouncing multiple characters. Now, because we went a little overprice on the second Emerald card, I'm going a little underprice on the third one, and that is the song Heffalumps and Woozles. I'm trying to include a song or an action in every single one of these, because I do believe that while characters are important, there are not a ton of decks out there that just thrive in just being characters. You always want maybe 1 or 2 actions to come alongside it. And this is a fantastic song that came out in set 6. Chosen opposing character can't quest during their next turn, draw a card. So we talk about card advantage. When I play a card, I am getting its effect, but I'm technically, unless it replaces itself, I'm going down in card advantage if it's just an action, unless I'm able to remove something or stall something. So at first you may say, hey, chosen opposing character can't quest during the next turn. Well, why does that matter? Well, there are certain cards that we're going to see throughout the game that when they quest, big things happen. There's an honorable mention that we're going to make inside of Sapphire, Hiram Flaversham, that whenever he quests, he's going to draw his opponent 2 cards. So if you have the opportunity to have Hiram Flaversham not be able to quest, you're going to stall their card draw. Now, if we pair Heffalumps and Woozles, which is a song, with the muses that we just talked about, our Ursula, who's a 2-drop, can actually sing Heffalumps and Woozles. She can then cause a character to not quest, and we replace, because we played Heffalumps and Woozles, we replace that card in our hand, and then we can use the muses trigger to either bounce an opponent's card back to their hand, or we can bounce a card back to our own hand. If we know they have a song that we're looking at, we could bounce that Ursula back to our hand, play it again, get another look at their hand, see what they have going, and yoink another song out of their hand, especially if we think we know they have one. There's just so many little combos that exist, and that's why I chose these 3 cards together, because I do think that they play into each other really well. Now, our honorable mention in Emerald is going to be Go Go Tamago, the Darting Dynamo. At the time of recording this, it is $2.15 for your first copy of Go Go Tamago. She does 2 things that are really cool. First, she's evasive, which means that she can only be challenged by characters who are also evasive. Lots of decks are not going to run evasive characters, and so because of that, they can be very difficult to get rid of. If they don't have evasive answers, this character can just be turning sideways and questing for free, knowing that it's going to take a removal action or song to get rid of it, which is super powerful and can put a ton of pressure on the board. But Go-Go's real ability comes in on when you play this character, you may pay 2 ink to gain lore equal to the damage on chosen opposing character. We talked about Reach with purple in the bounce package, where they can go bang and at 17 lore on their turn with no characters down, they could still, in theory, win the game by going Merlin Goat, Madam Mim Snake, Merlin Goat again, and gain that quick 3 lore just based off of Goat moving in and out of the board. Go-Go Tamago, you can pay, essentially treat her like a 4-cost card, and you can damage an opposing character that has a lot of health, where they are thinking to themselves, well, hey, at least it's alive because it challenged into something big. Well, no, when Go-Go Tamago's on the board, the best part is that she can gain you lore upon entering the board for just an additional 2 ink, and surprise, surprise, the combo still exists. She only has 2 strength, which means that when you sing a song with your muses, you can bounce Go-Go back to your hand, and if you have enough ink, you can play her again. So there's just infinite bounce possibilities. People have to respect, you'll hear people talk about Go-Go math. This is a card that when you're playing against Emerald, it's another one, just like Ursula Deceiver, that you have to assume your opponent has and is going to make your opponent have to play around. Moving on to Ruby. Ruby's sort of identity is removal. These big characters that come in, I think fire and like burning away certain things. And so our first character is one who is affectionately known as one of the ladies in chairs. Even though we see the picture, Medusa is sitting on a table. Madame Medusa is a 6-drop that people constantly have to be playing around. You're noticing a trend here that these are powerful cards that have been so relevant in being part of the competitive meta that when you're playing against these colors, you just have to assume on turn 6, hey, Medusa's on the table. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 3 strength or less. I mean, she just comes down onto the board, and upon entering the board, she is going to immediately get rid of a 3 strength or less character. Now, if they have ward, obviously that helps keep them safe, but there are so many good characters that have 3 strength or less. I think of inside of Steel, there's a card called Beast Tragic Hero that draws cards for its player. It's a 3/5. Well, congratulations. When Medusa enters the board, Sad Beast gets even more sad because he's immediately banished. Medusa is so powerful, and even if that was just her ability, she would still be a really good card, but she's also a 4/4, so she has a really strong body in terms of 4 willpower, makes it a little tough to remove, and 4 strength, so she can really hit like a truck, which is awesome. Often you'll see people do a 2/2 of the ladies in chairs. We'll have 2 Madame Medusas and 2 Lady Tremaines, but spoiler alert, Lady Tremaine may be our honorable mention. We'll talk about her in a second. Next up, if you're playing red, another card that you always have to be ready for is Brawl. You'll see in steel, we talk about removal via doing damage. In red, it's just straight up removal with some restrictions in terms of the strength usually of the character or if they have damage, things like that. Brawl is a 3-cost action that means it can't be sung, but it is an action. Banish chosen character with 2 strength or less. This is a very great way to get rid of a lot of strong answers that exist inside of the early game. Lots of times red decks will sort of work their way to 3 ink and know that a Brawl is waiting around the corner. If you're playing against a red deck, you always have to be ready for that Brawl to be dropped, and you are licking your chops whenever you see someone ink a Brawl early into the game, because it either means they're sitting on some uninkable characters that are big, or they may have multiple Brawls. You never know. This is a really great action that is super powerful and allows you to sort of gain that board presence back. And we talk about card advantage. Well, you're playing this action, you're getting rid of one of their characters, which is incredible because that is a 1-for-1 trade in the card advantage. Third is going to be a unique one that may not be on a ton of people's list, but I think that if you're trying to spice things up, this can be a really cool character that a lot of people are not expecting. We talk about so many things that you have to play around. This one's going to catch people off guard quite often, and it is Goofy Super Goof. This is a 4-drop inkable character that it has 2 strength, 4 willpower, and it has the ability Rush. That means this character can challenge the turn they're played. Most often, when I'm turning characters, if I'm looking at my opponent's board and they don't have any characters, I usually feel free to quest. Because the way Lorcana works, if you play a character, you have to wait at least a turn for that character to dry. That is unless they have Rush. This is where Goofy comes in. I can have characters that I'm turning and questing that maybe have 2 willpower, 2 health. It's going to be very easy to remove. But I'm looking across the table and I'm seeing that, hey, they don't have any characters, so it's fine for them to go ahead and turn. Surprise, Goofy Super Goof comes in, and he's a 2/4, so he's going to be able to eliminate that character because he has Rush, but also he has the ability Super Peanut Powers. Whenever this character challenges another character, gain 2 lore. This is fundamentally one of the coolest parts about Lorcana when it comes to exerting or turning those characters sideways. Often, if you're challenging with characters, you're sort of foregoing the lore to work on that board presence. But because of Super Peanut Powers, you get the best of both worlds. It's a real Hannah Montana situation where this character is challenging, but you're also gaining the lore, which can be phenomenal for sort of helping you gain that extra advantage. Now, our honorable mention does head into, it's the priciest card that we've talked about so far, but most often people are getting more and more interested in Lady Tremaine, which is why her price is starting to rise. About a month ago, she was only $1.50, and now she's starting to see a huge spike after Edmund Chu did really well at the North American Continentals by playing 4 of her in the deck. Lady Tremaine is our second Lady in Chairs. She's also a 6-drop uninkable, but her effect is that when you play this character, each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. Now, here's why this is important. Madame Medusa only banishes a character with a strength 3 or less, so her restriction is very, very particular. Also, she can't choose a character that has ward, which can really limit some of her use case scenarios, especially when you get towards the end of the game and players start playing these bigger strength characters, and you're looking at this Madame Medusa and you're like, well, I can't ink her because she's uninkable. What do I do? This is where Lady Tremaine comes in to shine, because when you play it, each opponent's going to choose and banish one of their own characters. They are going to choose it, which means it's an easy way to get around ward. If they only have one character on the board and it has ward and you play Lady Tremaine, they are the one choosing it, not you. There's another card inside of Ruby that is called Be Prepared. It is the board wipe of Lorcana. It allows you to get rid of every single character on the board, banish all characters. And so often you're going to play be prepared on turn 7 and banish the whole board. And they're usually maybe going to turn around and play a big character on their turn to try to sort of reestablish some board presence. But you can immediately swing back with Lady Tremaine if they go all in on a character, because once again, they only have one character to choose. So it's kind of like you're choosing for them. And she quests for 2, and she's a 3/4. Lady Tremaine, she comes in at $3.22, but certainly one that if you're interested in Ruby, I would start working on your Lady Tremaine playset. I don't think this card's going anywhere anytime soon. Moving on to Sapphire, we have our common action coming from set 6, and that is Sail the Azurite Sea. If you're talking about blue, you're talking about Sapphire, you're talking about ramp and the ability to sort of dump a bunch of cards into the inkwell at a faster rate than your opponent to give you the advantage of you can play more cards on your turn, or you can even play bigger cards on your turn. You sort of get ahead of them. The cards are sort of balanced against each other. A 3-drop is balanced against a 3-drop. But because you can ramp and get ink faster in blue and get ink faster through the ramping package, you're able to, on their turn 3, they only have 3 inks, so they have to play a 3-drop. Because you've ramped, you're actually able to play a 4-drop on turn 3. Or if you've double ramped, you're able to play a 5-drop. These are all things that you can see to sort of gain advantage, and blue really leans into these, and Sail the Azurite Sea is really cool. First off, on this turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down, and you draw a card. This card itself is inkable, which is awesome. It draws you a card, so it replaces itself, so you don't lose anything on card advantage. And in this turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down. Now, it does have to be inkable, but you essentially get to ink twice while going 1 card deeper into your deck. This is a phenomenal card and has made the consistency of ramping for Sapphire decks so high on turn 2, because you have this and you have Tipo, or you have 1 jump ahead. There are 3 different options that allow you to ramp on turn 2. Blue decks are just running away right now. So Sail the Azurite Sea, really great option. Next up is another card that is an absolute staple. She is something that allows you, when we talk about this ramping effect, we talk about on turn 3, people are playing 3-drops. But Grammatala, Keeper of the Ancient Stories, is our 4-drop inkable 3/3. So she's going to be a strong body coming in, but she also has the ability, when you play this character, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You add 1 to your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. She's inkable, so she's always going to be useful in that aspect, because in Sapphire, you're just looking to put cards into the inkwell. But she also allows you to look at the top 2 cards, pick one that's good, and then move the other to the bottom of the deck. In Sapphire, you're trying to sort of ramp and look through your cards so that you can find really powerful cards that are going to really help you out. Grammatala, she comes in at 11 cents. She's a great board presence. She does a lot. I think a lot of Sapphire decks really can lean on Grammatala quite often. And I think when you are playing Sapphire, when you go from looking at Grammatala as instant ink to start using Grammatala because of the 3/3 body and start utilizing her, is really where we see Sapphire players take that next step in their competitive game. Now, our next card from Sapphire is one that I don't think a lot of people are going to put on there, but we talked about how you're going to be ramping up and working your way towards some bigger threats. And this is where I think that this card really shines, especially in comparison to another big bomb option that we're looking. We talk about a bomb, we're talking about a card that enters the board and requires an immediate answer, or else your opponent is in trouble. I love that feeling when I'm playing the game, and I had it on stream the other day. I played against a Ruby Steel player, and he literally said, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." Looking at my board and realize what's there. You have to have answers for certain cards, and this card certainly has to be answered, but it's very difficult to answer, and that is Ariel Treasure Collector. Now, Ariel has Ward, like we talked about before. So not only is she difficult to answer, but her second ability, the Girl Who Has Everything, while you have more items in play than each opponent, this character gets +2 lore. That's right, she starts with 3, and if you just happen to have items in play, and most often when you're playing Sapphire, you're probably going to have some items there like popsicles, especially if you're playing with the honorable mention that we're going to talk about here in a couple cards. Well, she turns into a 5 lore quester. You got to remember, you only need to get to 20. So she has Ward. She can get you 1/4 of the way there in just one singular quest, especially if you have more items than your opponent. And lots of decks aren't running items. So because of this, she ends up easily becoming a 5 quester. Fits into our budget category. Now she is uninkable, so that is a drawback for her. So maybe you're only playing 2 of her. Maybe you're playing 3 of her. But if you don't want to make the jump to another card that people use as a bomb, which is Tamatoa then she is certainly a more affordable option. She's sort of people's budget Tamatoa, which I think can be really cool when you talk about that. Now, the fourth card we're going to talk about is the song How Far I'll Go. Now, this one is another ramp song. We talked about ramping in Sail the Azurite Sea, and we're kind of closing out in the standard section with How Far I'll Go. Look at the top 2 cards of your decks. Put one into your hand and the other into your inkwell face down and exerted. So this, like Grammatala, where she gets to look at the top 2 cards, she pick one, and then the other goes to the bottom of the deck. On this one, the one that would go to the bottom of the deck just goes to your inkwell. Far I'll Go is really fantastic. I think a lot of people love How Far I'll Go, and then they move off of it for a little while, and then we come back to it. It's just a very sneaky, great song. It pairs well with so many different things. Definitely check out How Far I'll Go. Now, my honorable mention for Sapphire is actually going to be Hiram Flaversham, the toy maker. There's a 1/6, and we mentioned him early on, and that is when we were talking about Hevelumps and Woozles. This card has a very simple effect. When you enter the board, when you play this character, and whenever you quest, you may banish one of your items to draw 2 cards. This is one of the best draw engines in the game. Lots of the items that you're banishing allow you to draw cards anyways. Hiram Flaversham, he's $3 right now. He goes in seasons where in around Christmas time, he was around $2, and right now he's up to $3. He kind of fluctuates between that $2 and $3 mark, just depending on how popular Sapphire gets. I know heading into set 7, Sapphire is going to be a popular color. Sapphire certainly got a lot of tools. It's going to be a very popular color, but Hiram Flaversham, if you're remotely interested in blue as a color, you're going to need 4 copies of Hiram Flaversham eventually. Moving on to our last color, and that is Steel. Steel is the second removal color that we're talking about in red, where they banish based on sort of your strength, and it's just straight up removal. In Steel, we're pinging damage. We're putting damage counters on folks. And our song that we have here inside of Steel, the first one we want to talk about is Let the Storm Rage On. Elsa doing her thing on the top of the mountain. This is a 3-cost uninkable song. Deal 2 damage to chosen character and draw a card. So it replaces itself, which is really powerful, as well as dealing 2 damage to a chosen character. That is usually enough to remove several of your threats, turns 1 through 3, which is really, really wonderful. And it draws a card. This is super, super powerful. I am still just so shocked. I feel like it's only because it's uninkable, but that usually doesn't hold a lot of Steel decks back from playing this card. Really, really great card. I love Let the Storm Rage On. It's probably one of my favorite cards in the game. It's very fun. I'm a big Steel player myself, so it was very difficult landing on the options. Another card that when you're playing in Steel, we're kind of coming back full circle of when you're playing against a certain color, there are cards you just have to expect that they have. And this card, Pete, Games Referee, is one that you certainly always have to be ready for if you're playing against Steel. Pete is a 3-cost, 3/3, and when you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. This includes actions and songs. So even if they want to not spend ink, they can't turn their cards to sing those songs. You get under Pete Lock. Where this is really helpful, as we talked about that Be Prepared in Ruby, that's this big, huge action that sort of cleans the board. Well, if I'm playing Steel and I have a Pete in my hand and I get into turn 6, I know they're going to ink up to turn 7. I know they're going to ink to 7 ink next turn. They might have a Be Prep in hand. I'm looking at 2 cards in their hand. I have to assume one of them is ink, one of them is Be Prepared. Well, it's easy. I just go ahead and play Pete down on the board, and now they can't play that Be Prepared, and it's not inkable, so they can't really ink it either to get rid of it, and I can sort of stall the game out by keeping them from playing actions. Lots of times you can use Pete to either stall early momentum if you know that they're about to do something big, or you can use Pete to sort of lock out and close the game. Let's say I go super wide with a bunch of characters, and they don't have a lot of characters on board. Actions and songs are how they're going to really help get the momentum moving back in their direction. But when you play Pete, they suddenly have to just be able to play characters to challenge. And like we talked about earlier, most characters, if they're not super goof, if they don't have rush, they can't really do much when they enter the board in terms of challenging and eliminating characters. So Pete can be really, really critical in closing out the game. Pete locks changed sort of the game plan of modern Lorcana. Our third Steel card that we're going to look at is a card that I think is so sneaky good, and we're going to throw a shout out to the first card we mentioned, Julietta Madrigal, and that is Lawrence Jealous Manservant. While this character has no damage, he gets +4 strength. So he's a 3-drop that quests for 2, and he's a 4/4 essentially when he enters the board, which means for someone to get rid of him, he's going to essentially eliminate most every single card that tries to attack him, because he has that 4 damage. So trading into him gets very, very difficult. Now, once he has damage, he's a 0-4. But that is where Julieta Madrigal comes in. Let's say he swings in and takes out a 1 strength, 4 willpower character. He just one-shots it. But now he has 1 damage, so he's kind of easy to take out because he has 0 health. Until you play Julieta Madrigal, heal that 1 damage off of him, and boom, he's back to a 4-4. Also, if you're playing him with the Muses, when he has a damage, he goes down to 0 strength. You can just bounce him back to your hand with a song, and then you can play him again. He's a 4-4. Lawrence's ability to be a nuisance and go in and out of the game and go from being healed to doing massive damage again is just really, really cool, and I think has a really profound impact on the game. Phenomenal card that I definitely think people need to be paying attention to. And last but not least, we can't talk about Steel without this honorable mention, and that is Mr. Smee, the Bumbling Mate. This is arguably the best 2-drop in the game, according to so many folks. He is a 2-cost 3/3, so already huge stat line, who quests for 2. His big weakness is, oh dear, dear, dear. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, deal 1 damage to this character. He self-damages at the end of his turn if you don't have a captain in play, but surprise, surprise, there are a lot of captains out there. Captain Hook, most notably, alongside of him, but there are so many captains that you can play. If you're going to play Steel, this is a must-have. This is, I would even say, if you're just getting into Lorcana, this is a must-have. He is a really, really powerful card that often can be such a game changer, whether you're questing with him the first 2 turns and getting 4 lore out of him because people don't want to trade into him because of the fact that he's a 3/3 and just auto-eliminates most things that attack him. But on that 3rd turn, you can either grab 2 more lore or know that he's going to banish himself that turn anyways and just challenge into something else and take them with you on the way out. So that is going to wrap up our 20 cards. It's a longer video, but really wanted to sort of give you the insight into all of it. If these types of videos are something you're interested in, I certainly want to be doing some budget builds for decks that you should look at. And I will tell you that lots of the cards that we talked about here today are going to be included in those budget builds. So I just think it's a really fun idea that doesn't exist in Lorcana. And if you're getting into the game, like I said, these are all 20 cards that I think could buff out most every single starter deck and make them really, really powerful. And they're extremely affordable. So I hope this was helpful. What is your favorite card that we mentioned? And then even more so, would love to know what are cards that fall into this budget realm of $1 or less that if you're trying to buff up your collection or you're trying to look at a deck, they're almost always you're going to them and you're trying to add 4-ofs into your lists. Would love to know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. If you consider this helpful, it would be really helpful to the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all of the YouTube things. It just helps get us in front of more eyeballs and helps we're trying to see if we can help the Lorcana community and live in a sector that I don't think is necessarily being lived in too much right now. So with all that being said, for now, we're going to leave you with the questing.